I did it because I loved my brother. For 35 years, Stephen was more than family, he was my anchor. The only person who really understood what it meant to grow up in our father's shadow. To build something from nothing with your own two hands. When Stephen died in that boating accident on Lake Pleasant, I stood at his funeral and made a promise. I'd take care of his family. I'd make sure his wife Rachel and their son Jake never wanted for anything. My name is Thomas Mitchell. I'm 64 years old. I live in a small ranch house in Phoenix, Arizona, not far from the construction sites where Stephen and I used to work side by side before I retired. After the accident, after we scattered what they told us were his ashes over the lake he loved, I started sending Rachel $900 every month. My pension from 40 years of construction work covered my bills, but just barely. So I took a job at Ace Hardware 4 days a week, stocking shelves, helping customers, feeling my arthritis flare up every time I lifted a box. My back ached. My hands were stiff in the mornings, but every time I handed Rachel that envelope of cash, every time I picked Jake up for his basketball games and saw him wearing the shoes I'd bought him, I felt like I was keeping Stephen's memory alive. Like I was honoring the man who'd pulled me out of the darkest time in my life when my wife left me 10 years ago. Rachel lived in a 2-story house in Tempe, the house she and Stephen had bought together when his construction business took off. Nice neighborhood, palm trees lining the streets, kids riding bikes in the driveways. Every first of the month, I'd drive over, climb those front steps that seemed to get steeper each time, and hand her the money. She'd hug me, thank me, tell me how much Jake talked about Uncle Thomas, tell me how hard it was being a widow at 55, how the insurance money was running out, how grateful she was for my help. But there was something in her eyes I couldn't name, something that didn't quite match the tears on her cheeks, something distant, almost rehearsed. 2 years. 2 years of those stares. 2 years of working myself into exhaustion on my feet all day at the hardware store. 2 years of sleeping 5 hours a night and waking up with my joints screaming. 2 years of watching Rachel struggle, or so I thought. Then one Thursday morning in April, my neighbor knocked on my door. Mr. Rodriguez was 72, a retired police detective who'd moved in next to me about 8 years ago. We'd become friends. The kind of friendship built on morning coffee and mutual understanding of what it meant to grow old in a city that kept getting younger. We'd sit on my porch some evenings, watch the sunset turn the desert sky purple and orange, talk about the old days. "Thomas," he said, standing at my screen door with his hands in his pockets. His face was serious. "We need to talk about something." I invited him in, poured us both coffee from the pot I'd just made. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Stephen and I had drawn up plans for his first construction project 20 years ago. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. He kept tapping his finger against his coffee mug, a nervous habit I'd never seen from him before. "What's going on?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "You still helping out Stephen's widow? Still giving her money every month?" "Yeah, $900. First of the month." "Why?" "Thomas, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me on this. Next time you go there, don't tell her you're coming. Go on a different day, and park down the street. Watch the house for a while." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? I can't tell you everything yet, but I'm asking you as a friend. Please, just watch the house. You'll understand." Rodriguez had been a detective for 30 years. He'd seen things, knew things, had instincts that came from decades of reading people. If he was telling me to do this, there was a reason, a serious reason. 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon, I parked my truck 4 blocks from Rachel's house and walked. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I found a small Mexican restaurant across the street with outdoor seating and a clear view of her driveway. Ordered coffee I didn't want. Sat at a corner table. Waited. At 1:30, a silver BMW pulled into Rachel's driveway. The car was new, expensive, gleaming in the Arizona sun. A man got out, maybe early 50s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt. He walked to the front door like he owned the place. Didn't knock. Used a key. A key. My mouth went dry. 15 minutes later, he came back out. But this time, Rachel was with him. They were carrying shopping bags, designer bags from stores at Scottsdale Fashion Square. They loaded them into the BMW, laughing about something. Rachel looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen since before Stephen died. Then they got into the car together, and as the man backed out of the driveway, I heard it. A sound that made my blood freeze. He was whistling. A specific tune. Off-key. A habit so distinctive that you couldn't miss it. Take me out to the ball game, but with the notes all wrong in the same way. Every single time. I'd heard that whistling before. At Stephen's funeral. Standing by the casket. It was Kevin Brandt, Stephen's business partner. The man who'd given the eulogy. Who'd talked about what a great man Stephen was. How they'd built their construction company together from the ground up. The man who'd hugged Rachel and told her he'd always be there if she needed anything. Kevin was living in my brother's house. I sat at that table until the sun started to set, until my coffee had gone cold 3 times and the waiter stopped asking if I needed anything else. Then I drove home in a fog and went straight to Rodriguez's door. He opened it, saw my face, and stepped aside without a word. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice shaking. Rodriguez sighed heavily. 4 months, maybe longer. I was at the grocery store in Tempe, visiting my daughter. Saw Rachel and that man loading groceries together, laughing, acting like a couple. I didn't know who he was at first, but something felt wrong. So I started watching, following up on old instincts. He poured me a whiskey, sat down across from me. "Thomas, that's Kevin Brandt, Stephen's business partner. He's been living in that house with Rachel for at least 6 months, maybe more. The BMW? Registered to him. I ran the plates. I checked county records. He sold his condo in Scottsdale 8 months ago. Never bought anything new, because he didn't need to." "What about Jake?" I whispered. "Jake's been living with Rachel's sister in Flagstaff for over a year. Rachel told everyone he needed a change of scenery after losing his dad, that her sister had a better school district. But the truth is, Thomas, Rachel didn't want to raise a teenage boy. Too inconvenient for her new life." I felt like someone had reached into my chest and torn out my heart. The room spun. The whiskey burned in my throat, but I couldn't feel it. "Where does my money go?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "They're saving it. Rachel, Kevin, all of it. I've watched them. They meet at a bank in Scottsdale twice a month. Make deposits. I think they're planning to leave. Start over somewhere else." I drove home that night and didn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my brother's business partner, the man who'd stood next to us at job sites, who'd been to every family barbecue, every birthday party, could do this. How Rachel, the woman Stephen had loved for 20 years, could betray not just his memory but his son. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I hired a private investigator named Linda Vasquez, former FBI agent, highly recommended by Rodriguez's old contacts. I gave her everything Rodriguez had told me, and $1,200, more than I'd ever given Rachel in a single month. "Find out everything," I told her. "I need proof. I need to know what really happened to Stephen. Because if they're capable of this, they're capable of anything." Linda was thorough, relentless. Over the next 4 weeks, she built a file that grew thicker every time we met. Documents, photographs, audio recordings, bank statements. Stephen hadn't died in an accident. The official report said engine failure, a gas leak, an explosion on Lake Pleasant while Stephen was out fishing alone. Early morning, no witnesses. They'd found debris, some blood, enough to close the case, enough to pay out the life insurance. Arshawan. But Linda found the marina mechanic who'd serviced Stephen's boat 2 days before he died. The mechanic remembered something odd. Kevin Brandt had shown up the day after the service, asking detailed questions about the boat's engine, about fuel lines, about safety checks. At the time, the mechanic thought Kevin was just worried about his own boat. Now, it looked different. Linda found the boat shop where Kevin had purchased marine tools 3 weeks before Stephen's death. Specialized tools, the kind you'd need to tamper with an engine without leaving obvious marks. She found hotel receipts, Rachel and Kevin had been meeting at a resort in Sedona for weekend getaways, starting 3 years before Stephen died. Always paid in cash, but Kevin had used his credit card once for spa services. Once was enough. She found text messages. Kevin had gotten careless, backed up his phone to a cloud account with a weak password. Messages to Rachel from 2 months before Stephen's death. Can't wait anymore. He'll never agree to sell the company. We'll have everything we want. Just need to be patient. Lake trip next week. Perfect timing. Linda found the life insurance policy. $200,000. With Rachel as the sole beneficiary. But here's what made my blood run cold. Kevin had recommended that insurance agent, had driven Stephen to the appointment himself, had helped fill out the paperwork. And then Linda found something that broke me. A voice recording from a bug she'd planted in Rachel's car. Rachel and Kevin talking, driving back from Scottsdale after a shopping trip. How much has Thomas given us now? Kevin asked. Almost $22,000 over 2 years, Rachel said, laughing. Plus, whatever he spends on Jake's stuff. Shoes, fees, all of it. The old man works at a hardware store, Kevin said. At his age, with that bad back, all to help us build our nest egg. Stephen's brother always was a sucker for family, Rachel said. Makes it almost too easy. Do you think he suspects anything? Thomas? No way. He still thinks Stephen was some kind of saint. Has no idea what was really going on. They laughed. Both of them. Laughed about my sacrifice, about my brother, about everything. I listened to that recording 10 times. Each time, I felt a part of my soul turn to stone. Linda gave me one more critical piece of information. In 3 weeks, on June 1st, Rachel and Kevin were scheduled to close on a property in Costa Rica. A beach house, purchased under a shell company. They had one-way tickets booked for June 3rd. They were going to disappear with everything. The insurance money, my money, the proceeds from selling Stephen's business equipment, all of it, over $300,000 combined. Jake would be left with Rachel's sister. Forgotten. I would keep working at the hardware store, wondering why Rachel had moved without telling me. I went to the police the next day. Detective Sarah Martinez listened to everything, looked at Linda's evidence, Rodriguez's testimony, the timeline we'd built. Her face grew darker with each page. This is conspiracy to commit murder, she said quietly. Maybe first-degree murder, depending on what we can prove. The texts show premeditation, the tools, the opportunity, the motive, the financial benefit. It's all here. What do we do? I asked. We need more. We need physical evidence from the boat, or a confession, or a witness who saw something. The texts and circumstantial evidence might not be enough for a murder conviction. But, she leaned forward, we can definitely get them for fraud. The insurance fraud, the financial exploitation, and if we arrest them for that, sometimes people talk to reduce their sentence. What about Jake? My voice cracked. We'll contact CPS and Rachel's sister. If Rachel goes to jail, you can petition for custody. You're his uncle. You've been supporting him financially. You have a stable home. You'd have a strong case. Did I want custody? God, yes. Jake was 15 years old. He deserved to know the truth about his father. Deserved better than parents who'd killed for money and then abandoned him. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Martinez worked with the district attorney's office. They got a warrant for Kevin's financial records, found the cash deposits that matched my payments to Rachel. They got a warrant for the boat debris, still in evidence storage, and had a marine forensics expert re-examine it. The expert found evidence of deliberate tampering, saw marks in the fuel line that looked like tool marks, not wear and tear. They brought in the insurance company's fraud investigators, built a case for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, financial exploitation, and potential manslaughter. On May 25th, I did what I'd done every month for 2 years. I drove to Rachel's house, climbed those front steps one last time, knocked on the door. My knees ached. My hands shook. But this time, I wasn't alone. Detective Martinez and 3 other officers were parked 2 houses down, waiting. Rachel answered, wearing yoga pants and a tank top, her hair pulled back. She smiled when she saw me. That same rehearsed smile. Thomas, you're early this month. I wanted to catch you before things got busy, I said. I handed her an envelope, but this time, it wasn't cash. It was a letter. A letter explaining everything I knew, everything we'd found. A letter saying goodbye to the woman who'd helped kill my brother. Her smile faltered as she opened it. Read the first line. Her face went white. Thomas, what is this? That's when Detective Martinez and the other officers came up the walkway. Rachel Brandt, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and accessory to manslaughter. You have the right to remain silent. Rachel tried to run back into the house. They stopped her, handcuffed her right there on the porch while neighbors came out to watch. Where's Kevin? Martinez asked. Rachel's eyes darted to me, filled with hate now. You bastard, she hissed. You have no idea what you've done. Kevin Brandt was arrested 20 minutes later at a construction site in Mesa. He tried to resist, pushed one officer. They tackled him to the ground in front of his crew, in front of everyone he'd worked with. They found $15,000 in cash in his truck. My money, Stephen's money. The trial took 8 months. The district attorney charged Rachel with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. That was me. And accessory after the fact to manslaughter. They charged Kevin with second-degree murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. The defense tried to argue that Stephen's death was an accident, that the boat tampering was speculative, that the relationship between Rachel and Kevin was irrelevant. But the texts were damning. The timeline was damning. The tools were damning. The financial motive was damning. Linda's recordings played in court. The jury heard Rachel and Kevin laughing about me, about my bad back, about how easy it was to take my money. I sat in the gallery and watched jurors' faces turn cold. The marine forensics expert testified about the fuel line. The marks were consistent with deliberate cutting, not wear. The explosion pattern suggested intentional sabotage. The insurance investigator testified about the policy, about Kevin's involvement, about how unusual it was for a business partner to be so involved in someone else's personal insurance. And then Jake testified. He was 15 now, taller, older than the last time I'd seen him. Rachel's sister brought him from Flagstaff. He took the stand in a suit that didn't quite fit, his hands shaking. The prosecutor asked him about his mother, about the last 2 years. She didn't want me around, Jake said quietly. After Dad died, she said I reminded her too much of him, said I was too much work. She sent me to Aunt Linda's. I thought it was temporary, but then she never asked me to come home. She'd call maybe once a month, sometimes less. Did you know about Kevin Brandt? The prosecutor asked. I met him a few times before Dad died, at company parties. He seemed nice. Then after the funeral, Mom told me Kevin was helping with Dad's business stuff, helping her sort things out. She said not to worry about it. When did you find out they were together? Last year. I came home for Christmas. Kevin answered the door. He was living there. Mom acted like it was normal, like I should have known. I went back to Flagstaff the next day. How did that make you feel? Jake's voice broke. Like I didn't matter. Like Dad didn't matter. Like everything was just gone. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Kevin Brandt, guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, 13 years in state prison. Rachel Mitchell, guilty of accessory after the fact to manslaughter, guilty of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, guilty of financial exploitation, 10 years in state prison. After the sentencing, I drove to Flagstaff to see Jake. He was staying with Rachel's sister, Linda, in a small house near the university. Linda was 52, kind-faced, exhausted from trying to raise a teenager while working full-time as a nurse. She met me at the door. Thomas, thank God you're here. Come in. Jake was in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring at his phone. He looked up when he heard us, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw Stephen in his face. The same eyes, the same jawline, the same way his eyebrows pulled together when he was thinking. Jake, I said, sitting down next to him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. He nodded, Didn't speak. Your dad was my best friend, I continued. He would have hated all of this. What they did, what they put you through. And I want you to know, if you want, there's a place for you. With me. In Phoenix. Jake looked at me. Why would you want me? Because you're Steven's son. Because you deserve better than what you got. Because I promised your dad I'd take care of his family. And I meant it. Linda put her hand on my shoulder. I love Jake, she said softly. But I'm not getting any younger. And he needs a father figure. Someone who knew Steven. Someone who can tell him stories about his dad that aren't. She paused. That aren't tainted by all this. It took 3 months to finalize the custody arrangement. Linda was supportive, helped with the paperwork, the transition. The judge approved it quickly. I was Jake's uncle. I'd been financially supporting him all along. I had a stable home. On a hot day in August, I brought Jake home to Phoenix. To my small ranch house with the desert landscaping and the garage where Steven and I used to work on projects together. I enrolled him in Desert Vista High School. Helped him try out for the basketball team. Started teaching him carpentry in the evenings. The same way Steven and I had learned from our father. We didn't talk about the trial much. But one night, about a month after he moved in, Jake came out to the garage where I was working on restoring an old wooden chair. Uncle Thomas? He said quietly. Yeah, buddy? Did you really send Mom money every month for 2 years? I did. Why? I looked at him. Because I loved your dad. And I thought I was helping his family. Thought I was doing what he would have wanted. Jake was quiet for a minute. Then he said, I'm glad you didn't give up. Even after you found out. I'm glad you still wanted me. My throat tightened. You're Steven's son. Your family. That means something. He nodded. Picked up a piece of sandpaper. Can you show me how to do this? We worked together until midnight, sanding and staining. Not talking much, just being. The same way Steven and I used to be. I think about my brother sometimes. Wonder what he'd think about all this. About Rachel and Kevin in prison. About me raising his son. About the fact that the people he trusted most in the world were the ones who killed him. I think about the 2 years I spent working at that hardware store. My back aching, my hands stiff, climbing Rachel's stairs every month. All that money, $22,000. Funding their escape, funding their betrayal. But I also think about Jake, about the kid who learned carpentry with me, who made the basketball team, who started calling me Uncle T and meant it with affection, not obligation. About the kid who, on the anniversary of Steven's death, helped me scatter new flowers on the lake where his father really did die, not in an accident, but in murder. The people who betrayed us are behind bars. Justice was served. But the real victory isn't their punishment, isn't the 13 years or the 10 years or the guilty verdicts. The real victory is Jake. Upstairs in the bedroom we painted blue together, working on homework, surrounded by pictures of his dad that I gave him, stories I told him, memories I've kept alive. I did it for my brother once. Sent money, broke my back, sacrificed everything because I thought I was honoring his memory. Now I do it for his son. Work at that hardware store. Stretch my pension. Teach carpentry and basketball and how to be a good man. Because that's what Steven would have really wanted. Not the money. Not the martyrdom. Just his boy. Safe and loved, and learning that family means showing up. Even when it's hard. Even when you've been betrayed. Even when your knees ache and your back protests. I'm 64 years old. My joints hurt in the morning. But every day, when Jake comes down for breakfast and tells me about his day, about his games, about his friends, I feel like I'm keeping Steven alive in the way that actually matters. Not through money, not through sacrifice that feeds betrayal, but through raising the son my brother loved, teaching him the values we grew up with, showing him that even when people fail you, even when trust is broken, family can still mean something, can still be rebuilt, can still be worth everything.